If you don't take your deliverables seriously, if you don't inspect your own work, if you don't hold your own team accountable, then on average, agencies can do bad work. And we track essentially client attainment and performance for every account publicly across the whole company to make sure we're not doing it. From middle managers being held accountable to strategists being held accountable to directors being held accountable. And it's not held accountable in some negative sense. It's just a public leaderboard. Are you hitting your client's goals or not? And it forces two things. It forces you to set better goals and it forces you to attain them. And that's, I think, how you build a strong business.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. Today we're joined by Garrett Mehrguth, who is the founder of Directive. Now, this is a super interesting interview. Garrett is an awesome operator. They've grown to between $20 and $30 million in revenue. They are a generalized marketing agency, but again, started with SEO, taken about 6 to 7 years. Garrett's founder CEO, and his focus on operations and client happiness/results is, I believe, inspirational. So here's a super awesome episode for anybody in the service world. But also the lessons can obviously be applied to SaaS or any other types of B2B businesses. So super stoked that you guys are going to get to hear this interview shortly. Quickly, a shout out to Fame.so for doing all the work to produce this show. We find guests, produce assets, and promote podcasts for B2B brands. If you would like a show like this, go to Fame.so, tell them I sent you, and we will make sure we look after you in that process. So let's jump into this discussion with Garrett right now. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Is it true that you created the $100 gift voucher to jump on a demo campaign?
Not me, but I said yes to it, which I think is a big part. I can't take the credit for the creation. The credit actually goes to a very talented woman named Hannah Mans, who now does ABM leads all of ABM for Twilio, I believe. But at the time, she was my director of marketing and she screwed up. So what happened was we had Sendoso and we had a large account with Sendoso. And so Sendoso has a use it or lose it credit system. She wasn't aware. I wasn't aware. And on top of not being aware of the credit system being use it or lose it, we were not aware of the renewal. And so the renewal was up around the corner. I think we had $16,000, if I remember correctly, dollars in Sendoso. And she didn't know what to do with it. So she said, hey, what if we just gave people a gift card? We could update our LinkedIn ads like by end of day today or tomorrow, whatever it was, we'll launch it and we can use the whole thing. Well, when that happened, we had a manually verified list of 10,000 target accounts that we wanted to break into in the B2B SaaS space. And we held sales calls with 6,800 of them in the first 18 months, all from the gift card. And now I think it's about 5 years later and the gift card is still crushing it. It's crazy.
That is an absolutely incredible hit rate on the 10,000, 68%. Because I hear some other people on the internet and on LinkedIn like slagging off that strategy. But you got in front of all of those companies and presumably it was a profitable campaign, even including the $100 per demo or $100 per sales call.
Yeah, there's a lot of talking heads on LinkedIn who don't have practical experience with what they're discussing. They're exceptionally bright and they're even more theoretical. And I would argue that Directive is pragmatic in the sense that we all have hypotheses. And I would say Directive does a good job of testing those. And a lot of times, most of the time, our hypotheses are wrong. And I think that the critical part of having an opinion is validating it with one's own experience instead of with the money of others, especially as an agency. So back when we were doing this, for example, I think I did 18 million in bookings last year from LinkedIn ads with the gift card. At the same time, most of my competitors were saying it didn't work and I was able to take their market share. So I think that a lot of times people have opinions that are wrong.
And that is what we're going to talk about today, because we have gone, or Directive and you have gone from from zero to roughly 25 million in over the last 10 years. And I'm fascinated by agencies, and especially agency founder CEOs that are able to buck the trend and create breakout, awesome service businesses. So I want to go through growth, international expansion, ops, finance, etc., and trying to understand how you've done this. How does that sound?
Sounds amazing. It'd be super fun. Let's do it.
So let's first talk about growth. I know the LinkedIn example. I think that you guys planning to offer that as a service to your clients. So you went hard on it recently and you personally did that, right? It wasn't somebody where you put it as support from your team, but where you were driving that knowledge gaining campaign.
Yeah. I mean, in general, to me, this is a personal belief. I have not been able to do anything very well in my business that I didn't get to work for myself first as a service offering. So if I'm going to sell it to an organization, I want to do it for myself. So for example, if I was like a D2C agency, I would probably have to have a brand that was like a flagship brand underneath the agency that I could test everything on. At Directive, because I serve B2B SaaS and I'm an agency with an MRR recurring business model that still has variable pricing, just like they had usage-based pricing, we actually have the exact same core components of our businesses between SaaS and agency. And so when like we have similar AOVs, we have similar desires for a explicit type of customer with certain firmographic and psychographic traits. We share so much in common. So I've noticed every time I can get something to work for me and it has an authentic story. Hey, I function as the chief revenue officer at Directive. I wanted to accomplish this thing. Here's how I did it. And I can do it for you. It's just different. I don't have to tell you, like when you can just be honest with somebody and be like, yeah, I'm not just like all the other agencies. Sure, I have more B2B SaaS spend under management than I think anyone else in the world. But I also do it for myself. And here's my story. And I think that the do it for myself and my story part resonates a lot better. And it helps us have better internal training. It helps us have better hiring. We have a true innate understanding through proximity and actual application of how to get something to work. And that experience translates across the firm into our talent, into our onboarding, into our training, into our deliverable. And it's not theoretical and it's not in the clouds. It's like pragmatic and applicable. And I think that's why we're able, for example, LinkedIn, no one is good at LinkedIn advertising. There's not a large labor pool. If you audit the accounts, it's almost always set up wrong. And for a long time when I audited Directive's accounts, they weren't set up right. Like just call a spade a spade. Everyone struggles and makes mistakes with this. And if you don't take your deliverable seriously, if you don't inspect your own work, if you don't hold your own team accountable, then on average, agencies can do bad work. And we track essentially client attainment and performance for every account publicly across the whole company to make sure we're not doing it. From middle managers being held accountable to strategists being held accountable to directors being held accountable. And it's not held accountable in some negative sense. It's just a public leaderboard. Are you hitting your client's goals or not? And it forces two things. It forces you to set better goals and it forces you to attain them. And that's, I think, how you build a strong business.
Let's talk about positioning because I understand you guys started just with SEO, but now pretty like the core marketing services you offer. Was that a strategic choice? And at what point did you decide that you are now ready to offer other things?
We started with just SEO, local SEO. I brought on a gentleman named Brady Cram. He's been with me now for about 9 years. He, at the time, was running ads for a medical device company. And he had this perspective of post-click that I deeply resonated with. It was this concept that the best way to drive advertising performance is not through button pushing in platform, which I believe is a commoditized thing and will become even more commoditized with AI, but instead your ability to articulate value post-click and to create a unified buying experience. So what did the ad copy say, right? We love to run these headlines now that are all like dynamically created and ads just don't make sense. It's almost like the art of advertising has lost its soul. And I had this soulful belief that like advertising should be artistic, should be creative, and can drive performance. But like it can be soulful. And he shared that. And so we started a paid media offering a couple of years in, and we saw it as a great cross-sell. They were both theoretically at the time, it was paid search and it was SEO. So really all it was, well, we had a concept called share of SERP. So the concept was if you're running ads and you know the average click-through rate is 2 to 4% and it's working, but you know the organic click-through rate's 29% in the first position, let's say, then if you really care, you can run ads, mine a search term report, see which queries are driving performance. And then you can also try to rank organically. You can try to show up on review sites. You can zoom out and stop looking at it as like, how are we doing with our rankings and say, is my brand discoverable when there's purchase intent for the product or services we sell? And so we really wanted to have a discoverability offering. And that's how it started.
So that was a very natural cross-sell. Did you find that you immediately grew revenue by 50% when you started offering that because half your clients took you up on it?
Even more than that. And it works like I do coaching for agency owners. So right now I coach 11 agency owners after hours when I'm not running Directive. And every one of them who started as an SEO shop and added paid media is now quickly seeing paid media outpace their SEO growth. Advertising is just a very special service in the agency world. So when you think about a service in the agency world and how agencies are valued as a multiple of EBITDA. EBITDA being the profit you have after everything else is paid for. And there's only one service I'm aware of right now that has what I would call incrementality or increasing marginal returns on your cost of goods sold. So with advertising, you can have a percent of spend billing model. And what that means is as someone spends more, you charge them less, but you're still charging them more than your cost of goods sold is increasing. In everything else, you don't really get that type of scale. So in SEO, if you're doing 5 pieces of content at this price, you have to do 10 pieces of content at that price. And that price is actually usually discounted from this price while you're not actually able to get any leverage on your hours. So you have diminishing marginal returns in most service businesses as you scale up volume. Conversely, paid media creates increasing marginal returns on your cash on hand, thus driving EBITDA, and is theoretically a very unique offering for an agency to offer.
Let's jump over to the finance stuff because I know this was the thing you were doing even pre-Directive, and it's something that I've heard you talk very passionately about. You mentioned about something to do with EBITDA, or if you're below 5 million in EBITDA, you need to get to 5 for you to have a valuable company. Do you still believe that?
Well, something you have to get to 5 to have a valuable company is that you have to get to 5 million according to private equity. And that's a range. Yeah, I'm sure you could be at 4.2 with the right mechanics, or you could be at 10 million, whatever it is. But in general, if you want to be the platform, okay, so the way agencies are sold and bought, from what I've learned, I haven't gone through the process personally. So this would be the hypotheses I'm talking about where people talk with great confidence with things they haven't personally experienced. But to not be ignorant, what I would say is in my discussions with bankers, private equity, and M&A folks in the space over the last 5 years and trying to do multiple deals myself, 5 million in EBITDA is when you become the platform. Less than 5 million in EBITDA. So if you have less than $5 million in profit in a year time period, you are normally acquired by someone else and integrated into either a strategic, like a holding company, like a Dentsu Aegis, and you now become, so like, let's say Directive. Okay. So let's say I'm at 3 million in EBITDA and WPP decides they want to get into the SaaS sector. They would buy Directive and Directive would be the SaaS agency for WPP. That would be that. At 5 million, a private equity group would buy Directive, like a Mountain Gate or someone like that. I think there's also Periscope, for example. They would buy Directive and then they would integrate other agencies into Directive, and Directive would be the home for the roll-up. And so you usually have to get to 5 million in EBITDA if you want to be the platform company.
Makes sense. Am I right in saying that you guys reinvested the majority of profits for the early years of the business? And if yes, are you still doing that now?
It wasn't the earlier. I mean, it was till this year. So I would say for the first 10 years, we ran the business purposely without even, I've never understood it. I guess I'm like a very simple-minded person. So all the books talk about why you need profit, but profit's simply a donation to the federal government. You can look at it a lot of different ways, but whatever you have in profit, you're paying taxes on. Okay. It's money you don't get to reinvest because it wasn't kept. It wasn't reinvested. So you have to give it to them, which is fine. I love this country. I love paying my taxes. I also don't willingly do that if I think there's a better opportunity to invest in my future. And so once I had 3 months cash runway, I think there's some kind of important caveats, right? So once I feel safe about my cash on hand, that my business can survive economic turbulence, then I want to have enough top line revenue to get to my long-term goals. So in my opinion, if you run a performance marketing shop, you're at any substantial size, you're not going to have more than 30% profit. If you do, great for you. You're the exception, not the rule. I'd say 20% is hard to get to at size. So 20 is your floor, 30 is your ceiling. And if 5 million is the floor if you want to be a platform company, then you're not magically getting to the 5 million through focusing on EBITDA. You're actually getting to the 5 million through focusing on top line revenue growth. And then when you're ready to go into EBITDA mode, you can cut expenses and beef up your margins and slow your growth rate. So you can be growing, let's say at 50% at 5 points EBITDA, and then you can slow down your top line growth rate and grow at 30% and have 20 points EBITDA. You're still an amazing success story at that point. Your business is actually ironically worth more. So all we did at Directive was focus on building up top line revenue to such a point that we could then start the 36-month journey to have profit so that we could do M&A and we could essentially elevate to the next stage in our journey.
So aside from the big marketing tests like LinkedIn, for example, were there anything else that you invested those potential profits or that excess cash in that had a big impact on the growth?
Yeah, products. I think a lot of agencies don't treat themselves like a product. So if I'm servicing SaaS and I know the importance of product marketing in SaaS, I once again want to emulate them so that I can better service them, right? So if all these SaaS companies have product marketing, why do agencies not have product marketing and treat their services like that? In other words, well, as you grow your agency, if you don't create that like intranet, the internal, like for us, it's Notion, where each service has examples, previous QBRs, previous weeklies, training materials on every line item in the SOW. If you don't have that like infrastructural depth, when you get from that like initial family of the agency that started and you start, let's say, getting to the professionals that join the organization from the outside, quality erodes because you no longer have that core nucleus, that kind of cultural group that you built it with. Oftentimes, if you go back in our group, that was a group that was all in office, all in purpose, like all in person, got lunch together every day for 6 straight years. That's a different group than when you're at 150, 200 people and it's global and remote. And so the only way to maintain your standards of excellence and your culture of performance is with really, really strong training materials, infrastructural consistency, and then lastly, visibility systems, where you can see how every strategist is performing in their portfolio, how much revenue they're managing, what their customer satisfaction scores are at different stages of the retainer, how they're personally saying the relationship is doing. So we have this thing where we have what we call like customer experience score, and we have a customer satisfaction score. And we have leaderboards across the whole company for every department, for every director, for every associate director, and for every strategist. And you can see, right? So how are the middle managers performing across their pod? How are the strategists performing across their portfolio? And what we do is we have this kind of checks and balance system where the team says how they think it's going. And then we ask the customer. And then the customer says how it's going. By adding both checks and balances, you have visibility and transparency, and you can't manipulate the system. And at the end of the day, it's exceptionally important. This is the biggest thing I learned, that your agency is externally focused, because the bigger you get, the more you get inwardly focused and your quality decreases. It's like quality and top line revenue are inversely correlated in agencies. And the only way to like reverse that, in my professional opinion, is to have a customer first culture with deep visibility systems that involves customer feedback, employee reverse feedback of the customer, and then visibility into goal attainment, so that every engagement you start at Directive starts with what we call North Star metric. And we state, what does success look like in this engagement? And for example, in Q1, Directive and its paid media department hit that North Star metric 79% of the time. That's a really big deal. Remember, a North Star metric and the way people hire agencies and manage us is we're always hired when the last agency failed for a number the business never attained. So 79% of the time, we're solving the problem the last firm couldn't solve and hitting a number the organization has never hit before. And to me, that's a really cool thing.
The other thing I've learned about you guys is that you have a distinct culture.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to do summer Fridays. Like, I'm here to work really hard. I want to be the best in my craft. I want to be ruthlessly committed to my own potential. And I want everyone who joins here to learn more about themselves, what they're capable of, and to become a better professional who has a bigger impact in their professional life on those around them and on their own ambitions. Yeah, I want to be an accelerator for performance. I want people to leave here and accomplish great things. I want to have a proud alumni that changes the world. They don't have to be here forever. I want them here as long as they're growing. If they stop growing and they're the right fit for us, they should leave because they need to keep pursuing more for themselves. But I want a culture that holds people accountable to their own potential and to their own ambitions and to really accelerate their growth in life. I think it's really important to me.
The issues I see is when founders may think like that, but then they're not upfront about it. And so people join and they not like filtered through. They may come in as someone that isn't like the type of person you want, but because you're so transparent, the filter will like someone's only going to get into the business if they agree with you. And then you can build that culture of like ambition and being the best.
No, you can't. You have to add one more thing called onboarding. That was our breakthrough. So my business partner, Tanner Schaefer, he does onboarding for the business. Onboarding is nasty, right? You're hiring people because you have a billable utilization need. In other words, there are clients that need service. There's team members that have too much on their plate. There's a real reason you are hiring. 75% of the time, they get out of onboarding. 25% of the time right now, someone gets hired at Directive and they never get out of onboarding. They don't actually get a client. So even with being in business for as long as we've been in, being as honest as we are about our culture, being as intense as we are about our expectations for client success, 25% of the time, the person either can't do what they claimed technically. That happens a lot, right? People come in, we do a practical project presentation where you have to demonstrate your expertise. We miss on that sometimes, or we make mistakes. And then you get into onboarding and you do mock assignments and they don't get out. I'd say that's a small percent. The vast majority of people who don't get out of onboarding is due to entirely controllable things that they just for some reason aren't passionate about when it comes to excellence or quality. I'm talking typos. I'm talking late assignments. I'm talking lack of communication. I'm talking about controllable things. Now, for the first 10 years of Directive, if you get really honest, that 25% of people, my clients would tell me stunk instead of me saying they stunk. Directive doesn't fire people. That's not like how it works. The client says, I don't want this strategist on my account. The problem is most organizations don't have a way of validating it first. And so what our kind of ethos is we don't want to have anyone who works at Directive as a strategist to get out of onboarding if we wouldn't feel comfortable putting them on a family member's account. Very simply put. So pretend a family member comes to you and has a business and says, we want to hire Directive. I want to, at random, close my eyes, point at anyone, and I can give them that account, and I feel confident that they're great. Every agency's got an A team, 3, 4, 5 people. They can put any account on, they crush it. What they don't tell you is they've got a big old bell curve, and it's not that heavily focused in the center. There's a lot of people on the low end of their bell curve, and that's where their churn comes from, and they kind of just exist with it. I'd rather not exist with it and try to filter out people that I don't think can match or exceed my customers' expectations through the onboarding process.
So shout out to Tanner, first of all. Would you say the onboarding process is like in the top 3 most important processes in the business?
It's becoming that. We've only been doing it this way for probably, I think year to date, so 5-6 months now. We've also never had better revenue retention and higher customer satisfaction scores. So yeah, I would say it's a top part of what is going to allow Directive to sustain its success. It also creates a ton of problems. Like we had to pause sales just now because we don't have enough labor, and I won't take on new clients, and I won't give people more than 5 accounts. So we have this concept called relational capacity because we have a consulting model where the person talks and pushes the button. So there's no like account managers unless it's like a really large account with a ton of services. But just 75, 80% of accounts have a singular consultant for each deliverable who talks and delivers.
Is that the strategist role you're talking about?
That's the strategist role, yeah.
Cool.
So they talk and deliver. It to me is a much better customer experience because I'm not doing like this and then they say, okay, I'll talk to your team. And there's this game of telephone and it creates this very frustrating relationship in my opinion. And SaaS marketers are exceptionally well paid, very bright and very hardworking. You have to be good to service them. They're one of the hardest roles in the world of service compared to like when I started with more like kind of mom and pop blue collar stuff where the point of contact isn't technically knowledgeable. Right now, almost every one of my point of contacts can run their own Google Ads campaigns, understands SEO, can fix their own marketing ops. These are very highly capable people, and you have to be able to create value for them. And so, yeah, it's really important. But if you can't, onboarding takes time, right? Someone might not get out of onboarding right away. And just because someone struggles at first with onboarding, if they're demonstrating the right behaviors, they want to improve, they're asking the right questions, they don't have typos and they don't miss due dates and they're bought in. It's like, let's go ride or die with this person because they have the character traits of someone who's going to be great. Those are controllable character traits that make people high performers and great to have in your organization. But that might take longer onboard. And so between onboarding, having really strong hiring systems, we run out of capacity sometimes and we just got to eat it. But it's either that or burn out your team and then do crappy work. And I'd rather not do that.
What is your day-to-day at the moment? And do you see that changing in the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, every 6 months, I try to take on a project. So I run Directive in halves instead of quarters. So when I ran on quarters, what I found is my executive team would copy and paste what they said they were going to do last quarter with different words because they didn't get it done. And you just end up recycling a bunch of garbage. So what we like to say at Directive is the depth of our solution is more important than the breadth of our activity. Being busy isn't a badge of honor. You need to create incremental impact that shows up on the P&L. If it doesn't show up on the P&L, it didn't matter. And so to do that, you usually need more time. You need to be sequential. You can't be doing a bunch of things at once. You need to go deep on one thing, get it done, go to the next. And you need to be iterative on the things that you've already done. And so my day-to-day, for the most part, is just looking at the greatest opportunities of the business. And I'm usually trying to find where I can have exponential growth. So last year, we launched in November a down market offering. For the first time in the history of the company, we launched a down market offering. The market was crummy in B2B SaaS. Budgets were all cut. I still had massive pipeline, but I couldn't really close them at my historical price because I went from being 8 to 13% of ad spend to 30 and 50% of ad spend with my minimum prices because they just didn't have much budget. And so we launched a new offering for $57.50 a month to month pricing, a flat rate retainer, and 60-day out clause, no long-term contract. That blew up with almost doing $3 million in ARR within the first few months. And I got to spearhead, design, build, and launch that entire initiative.
And was that for over like all services or just a small amount or one service?
No, I built it so that it had paid media, but very scoped down. It had SEO, but very scoped down. It had review sites, but very scoped down. It had landing pages, but very scoped down. It had all the things. I said, okay, if I was the CMO of a B2B SaaS company with limited internal resources and a smaller budget, what are the most effective tactics I've seen in the last 6 years of servicing B2B SaaS for every day of my life? What works, what doesn't? If I could only give them what works, none of the research, none of the fluff, none of the planning, just straight up value tactically delivered in a smaller amount of hours, what would that look like? And we built that package and it closes exceptionally well. And the business unit has exploded. I think the reason it was successful too is we pre-hired all of it and just bet on ourselves. So we ran a pilot, we sold it 3 times, it worked, and we hired 18 people or something. And then we just bet on ourselves. And then we rolled it out. But the quality's been great. The customer satisfaction scores are great. The retention's great. And the revenue's great. It's been really successful.
Let's talk about the agency coaching stuff, because I didn't assume you do that for need of cash. Is that more like a passion side hobby?
Yeah, I mean, I don't milk Directive. So like I've taken 2 bonuses in 11 years, I think. I paid myself the same way. I paid myself a percent of revenue according to partner equity. And so when we were small, I didn't make much money. When we're big, I make lots of money. So I've never changed the rules. And I think that's really important. When I talk to most agency founders, they pay themselves despite their performance. They just usually pay themselves a lot of money, even though their businesses might not be growing and their compensation isn't always a reflection of their success. And so at Directive, we've always paid ourselves a small percent of revenue, not EBITDA, to motivate ourselves to grow revenue, because more money, more problems in the agency game. And then if you want to make money, you got to earn it. So when the company lost money in 2023, I lost a lot of money. And when it's making more money, I'm making more money. We're still down from historical highs since Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and we got to go earn it, right? So we got to have a better strategy. We have to have better execution. We have to have better client success. We have to work harder if we want to make more money. I firmly believe that. And I try to stay exceptionally disciplined, and that I don't ever have treated the business as a piggy bank. It's a financial instrument. For me, it's almost a sport. It's a game. And the better I play the game, the more money I get to make. And the worse I play the game, the less money I make. And if you keep it authentic and true and you don't cheat, it's exceptionally motivating. I do the coaching because I run a consulting firm. I don't ever want to lose sense of what it is to help others, how to help others effectively. But most importantly, I've been running a simulation for my future for the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. I've been doing coaching. If my vision is to eventually be the chairman of the board and specialize in M&A, the concept is that I need to create leverage off of other CEOs without actually being involved in their day-to-day. I'm exceptionally strong at Directive because sometimes I stop coaching and I just start pulling up threes. In other words, I can play. When you do M&A, you don't get to play. All you get to do is coach. Most people are very good at playing and struggle to get leverage when they coach. You can ask Wayne Gretzky. You can ask Michael Jordan. You can ask every high performer who, for the most part, tried to go from playing to coaching, has struggled. And it doesn't mean they all struggle. It doesn't mean they don't break through or they don't evolve, but it's not like you just go do it one day and you're good at it. It's really hard. And so what I wanted to do is, before I started taking my own capital and investing it in others, I wanted to prove in practice that I could take an agency that I was coaching, provide them with advice, support, and insights, and grow their business. And I'm proud that I've done it with every one of the people I've coached. I've created a lot of economic value for them. And I feel like I'm preparing myself for what's next in my professional journey.
That makes total sense. Garrett, we're going to link to Directive below. We'll link to your LinkedIn profile and the YouTube channel. Is there anything else we can mention or link to?
I have a course. So I did something cool. So all my coaching and my courses on GarrettMehrguth.com. What I did is I got Directive involved in my course with me and our leaders. And so it has 5 sections that are kind of the 5 tenets of like an agency. So it has sales, marketing, finance, people ops, and operations. Each is a module. Each module is $895. And then the course is like $3,800. And essentially each lesson within each module is based on an asset, like a physical, practical, applicable part of the agency that we use to operate, run, or do it, whether it's a pitch deck, a just-in-time hiring sheet, a financial model. I then discuss why I built it, why I wanted it, why we did it. And then the owner and operator within Directive, the head of finance, the head of operations, the head of L&D, who actually manages and operates and executes that on a daily basis, speaks towards it. And then I do an interview at the end. So each lesson has 3 parts: my perspective, their perspective, and an interview about what we learned doing it together. And I think it's really, really valuable because as an owner of an agency, you can not only buy the course and learn, but you can forward it to your team and they can hear their own peer discuss it. And I think it creates a lot more applicable knowledge to add in like incremental value to your agency.
I love it. We will link to that below. Garrett, it's been an awesome journey so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing the journey continue. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me.
All right, team, what do we think about that? What do we learn about Garrett's kind of drive for client results and client happiness? I also love Garrett's view or his understanding and interest in the finance part, which I think that I definitely have a weak spot there. So awesome. Thank you so much, Garrett, for coming on. And of course, thanks to Fame for producing this show. And then thanks to you for listening.